How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. I very recently made a video on my first car and just gave you a story of everything that happened with that car. You guys seem to enjoy it, so I thought why not continue that story onto my second car, a car that if you've been watching my channel for quite some time you'll probably be aware of it, my 1.2 litre 2002 VW Polo 9N. As with the last video, I'll tell you my story with the car so far, and maybe one day in the future I'll make another video on this car that's a million times cooler. All the additional stories I'll hopefully be able to tell. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So picking up from where I left off in the last video, I had just crashed my Skoda Fabia estate, and obviously I was very upset, and I was actually pretty angry that the car had disappeared from my life just before I was supposed to be returning to university. It was literally just 4 days before I was supposed to be going back to university, and I needed a car to get me there. Luckily my dad's a car mechanic and knows people in the car trade, so he started ringing around and trying to find out if there was a car available that I could buy very cheaply and very quickly. The two cars he was able to find was a Renault Megane and a VW Polo, and the reason why I chose the Polo over the Megane is super ridiculous. It was literally just because I didn't like the handbrake on the Megane. It's that sort of lever looking thing rather than a standard handbrake. Basically, the Polo looked like it could do handbrake turns and the Megane didn't. So we bought the Polo, got it home. My dad had to do a bunch of stuff to the car to get it into an acceptable shape, just mainly like the bushes and make sure the brakes were fine, and did a basic service of the car just to make sure that it wasn't going to end up doing the same thing my Skoda did. All I did was swap the radio from the Skoda to the Polo, and it's never really worked properly since the crash, but I like the radio regardless, and it reminds me of the Skoda, so I always keep it in my Polo anyway. The day it arrived, I took my first drive in it to Wetherspoons, of course, the only way you can christen a car, and by the way, I wasn't drinking and driving, it was just to see an old friend. Because I didn't have to go through the insurers for my Skoda, I basically just swapped my insurance from my Skoda to my Polo, so I just carried on as normal. I think I paid an extra like £23 a year or something. And then I was back to uni, and just to put that into perspective for a second, my crash was on the 16th of September, I was sent photos of the Polo on the 18th of September, and then I was in Bath on the 20th of September for university. That was how short the timeline was between my crash and being back at university in my Polo. This is all 2017 at the time, by the way, and just in case you weren't watching from the previous video. Funnily enough, on the 19th of September I was actually already looking at modded versions of the Polo, as I promised myself that I would work on the Polo as I'd always planned to do with the Skoda. Just like the Skoda, the car was only £400 to buy, and that was for a pretty old car, 2002 plate obviously, with 76,000 miles on the clock and the ABS lights on, which is pretty much always the case with these old VWs it seems. So when driving to university, of course, taking my stuff in the Polo was slightly more difficult than it had been in the estate. When you go from an estate to a hatchback, you definitely feel the hit. I still got everything to uni in 2 cars, but the Skoda would have taken it all very easily. About 3 days after arriving back at university, I drove to Castle Combe with the car to visit my dad driving his Renault 5 and get in the car with him as well. The car still felt really quite weird to drive, if I'm perfectly honest. But following my crash, I was feeling quite emotional and I wanted to start doing other stuff, so I started my YouTube channel on the 24th of September, planning to get into making YouTube videos on my Polo and basically whatever I fancied relating to cars, just for fun. Pretty much as an ode to my Skoda. You'll see I posted a video on the 25th of September and then nothing for ages. That video is of course me at Castle Combe with my dad in the Renault 5, the first major event that I took the Polo to. So as I said, I didn't really feel that comfortable driving the car, so I decided that I would start doing my mods on it just to feel a bit more at home and settle into it a little bit more. I wasn't really in the right state of mind for filming at the time. I don't think I had the courage or the bravery to just start filming out on the street. So the first few things that I did to the car, I didn't even record. I did used to hook my GoPro up inside the car though, because I thought the footage might come in useful one day if I started actually making videos. And of course it actually did, as a whole bunch of my older videos start with footage that I recorded in my Polo around Bath. Within the first month of owning the car, I'd already gone to Halfords and bought some black plasti dip paint, which I used to spray the badges black. I did it actually whilst it was raining, and I remember some people commenting being like, what are you doing? But I really just wanted to get into working on the car as soon as possible. At the same time, I also removed the Polo logos from the rear of the car using a card, and you can probably still see the Polo marks if you look really closely. In terms of the car's use at uni, it was about as big for passengers as the Skoda, so still pretty ideal for getting people to and from uni. As I mentioned, I would always drive and park rather than take the bus. I honestly think I only took the bus maybe once or twice for nights out. Otherwise, I would literally drive or Uber, which is such a waste of money looking back on it, but it was fun, so whatever. The car was perfect for driving around Bath as well, a nippy little city car, perfect for the streets, and not good but not horrendous when climbing the hill to uni. Definitely not as good as the Skoda though. I also had the odd bit of motorway driving in the car as well, as I would drive the car to Bristol and back to go to Airhop or places like that. The car was surprisingly stable for a little car, and also one thing that I definitely noticed pretty quickly was that it didn't get blown around when driving past lorries as much as a Skoda did. One thing I mentioned in my last video was my talent for parallel parking, and this car really upped that talent a bit further because the Skoda was obviously quite a bit longer than the Polo, so fitting into tighter spaces was a breeze. That said, I also got my first parking ticket in the car. I was literally parked right outside my house and there were some dodgy sort of cracked yellow lines, and I definitely could have disputed it, but I just couldn't be bothered, so I just paid the 35 quid fine or whatever it was. At this point I was heading towards my first winter in the car, and one thing I very quickly realised is the car didn't really like to start up that much when it was cold. It would always start, but it would always feel like it didn't want to start, if you know what I mean. It got very snowy in Bath, and I'm talking like at least a foot of snow kind of snowy, and I drove the car only a little bit in the snow, and yes, it was an absolute death trap, and no, I would not suggest driving in the snow, but it was quite fun. But definitely not as much fun as sledging down the hills is in Bath. Around this time I also had the car's first real luggage challenge other than getting to and from uni. A whole bunch of my friends and I wanted to go to Budapest for the weekend, so we drove in my car down back to home to take a flight to Budapest, and by driving back home that meant we all had to fit all of our suitcases and stuff into my car, which was a bit of a mess, mostly because there was like 4 or 5 of us in my car, all of us with suitcases, and yeah, it did prove to me that the Polo was a little bit bigger than you'd expect, but at the same time I knew that the Skoda would have done better, so swings and roundabouts basically. Anyway, after this, when I was back at university, just as I was supposed to be starting my dissertation, I started procrastinating by making YouTube videos. And I wasn't really procrastinating, I work really well at night, so during the day I was getting more and more bored, as most people seem to work during the day. So what I would do is I would basically make a video during the day, drive to campus in the car after it was free to park, work all night, and then drive back home at like 3 to 4 AM with any other stragglers from the library that I also knew getting a lift back down in my car. This allowed me to put up basically one video a week starting sometime in March 2018. I had a few back and forths from London to Bath, and the car did prove itself quite useful on those trips, although one thing I would complain about is the fact that the seat was really uncomfortable on the lower back. I don't know why, but for some reason both the Skoda and the Polo suffer from this. Their seats are super unhelpful to your rear end. When I finished my dissertation, I still had loads of essays to get done, so I was still using the car basically as a nighttime car. It was much better around the streets of Bath though at the same time, so I would drive it into the centre quite a bit. One day I was just looking at my car and thinking there is so much wrong with this car that would just be so easy to fix, so I started the idea for the Pointless Polo Project and basically wanted to update a bunch of the bad stuff on the car. Whatever mods I wanted to do had to be cheap, as I was about £1,500 into my overdraft at this point in time, and it had to be easy enough for a student with limited mechanical ability to do whilst not having that many tools. So I replaced the gear boot, I did those awful LEDs in the car, which is an awful video, but I leave it up to you because I think it's quite funny. Sprayed the hubcaps black, wrapped the interior carbon fibre, and did all those kind of cheap mods that are very easy to do. I also did that 5 things I hate video about my car, which is still my worst like to dislike ratioed car. I don't think people got that I was just ragging on my car, not the Polo 9N more broadly. Hence I backed it up with that video on the 5 things I love about the Polo to kind of readdress the balance a little bit. Once I'd finished uni and headed home, I used the car to commute to and from a local college where I was working over summer to get out of my overdrafts, and I also used the car to get to and from the local driving range to play a bit of golf. One thing I noticed very quickly about the car is the fact that golf clubs don't really fit that well in the boot, particularly drivers. It was actually on one of the occasions where I was driving back from golf with one of my friends where the coil pack went, and another occasion I was driving down to collect my dad from his garage and a similar thing happened, the coil pack went and we had to fix it at his garage. This kind of kicked me into gear to start fixing some of the other issues with the car, so I fixed the aircon, I fixed the smashed wing mirror, I made the honeycomb grille as well, which is actually quite ambitious and I'm really proud of that. I actually need to do some re-gluing on it as well because it's starting to get a little bit more frayed. And again, I uploaded them all to YouTube and didn't really expect very much of them. I just liked making the videos and it was cool to make stuff about my Polo. It was basically an opportunity to go outside in the sun, make some some videos on my car and also have something to do after work. And then in August, the channel started gaining followers. I went from like 100 followers at the start of August to over 1,000 by the end of August, and then to sort of 2,500 by the middle of September, 4,000 by the end of September. All of this started to happen, and the Pointless Polo Project videos, which I expected to not be that popular, actually grew really well in popularity, and a load of people said they wanted to see more of the car. Loads of people started sending me messages on Instagram saying they really liked it and they wanted more inspiration for their polos. People started messaging on YouTube as well and commenting about the car and saying they really enjoyed the series, and I was just a bit like, oh, this was a cheap and cheerful way for me to have some fun with my car, and now a whole bunch of people seem to like it too, so I was obviously gassed about that. It obviously meant that I knew I had to keep on doing Pointless Polo Project stuff. I'd never really planned to get rid of the car anyway, but at this point I knew that I really couldn't get rid of it. From the start of October, I used the car as my commuter to and from my first grad job, which I wasn't a major fan of, so I left pretty quickly, but I still use the car as my commuter car to the station today. But to kind of consolidate the situation that I was in with YouTube growing and all that kind of stuff, I decided that I would make some plans to work on the Pointless Polo Project and give me a bit of a structure. I haven't pulled through on all of those plans yet, so I am sorry about that, but I still do have the plans to do them to the car. Some successes I have had with the car this year, though, include the suspension, the seats, the tyres, and the alloys for Christmas and all that good stuff. On the other hand, one failure that I had this year was wrapping the roof of my car, which obviously was the complete opposite of what I wanted to happen. But I will redo it one day and I will be successful. One thing that I have found really weird about the car now is that people have started to spot it around my local area and they message me on Instagram saying they've seen the car, etc., which is quite mad. Also, whenever I've gone to car events this year, people have been like, oh, I saw your car pulling in, and saying stuff about the car, etc., and I just find that absolutely nuts. You guys do realise that I'm literally driving a 2002 1.2 litre VW Polo 9N. It is not some ridiculously special car, and yet I'm still able to be a YouTuber, or whatever you want to call it, off of this ridiculous Polo. I think I see about 6 9Ns on the mile drive between my house and the local station. So it's not like it's a rare car, but I get people always messaging me wanting to see the car, and I just find that absolutely amazing and so sick. One thing I really wanted to do with the car this year was drive the Nürburgring. I haven't felt that the car's in a good enough place for me to take it there yet. I'd love to do an engine swap before then, and an engine swap is sort of on the cards for the car as well, mostly because I think the clutch bearing is starting to go, so rather than just have to do a whole transmission out job, I'm thinking why not transmission and engine out job and swap it for a 1.8T, but we'll have to see further down the line if that's doable. As an overall though, the car is ideal for everything I need it to do. It's perfect for YouTube because you guys seem to like the car, and that's also good for Instagram as well because my Polo pictures tend to be my most liked pictures, which is always fun. And it was mad to hear a whole bunch of people really scared that I was going to get rid of the car when I bought the MX-5. Of course, the two cars have very different purposes in my life. My Polo will continue to be my nice cheap and cheerful project that I drive as my daily, and the MX-5 will always just be this fun car that I get to do this mad project on and drive around tracks, etc. So at least in my head right now, there is no plan to get rid of the Polo. I'd quite like to keep it for a very long time. And for that reason, I'm sure in a couple of years there'll be some way more interesting stories for me to tell you about the car, and I'll probably make a part 2 of this video when that comes. I think it's safe to say that I owe part of the success of my channel so far to the Polo, and so for that reason, I want to thank you all very much for watching these videos on my Polo. Really appreciate all your guys' continued support. Massive thank you also to my patrons who are on screen right now. They are absolute legends for doing that extra level support. It's ridiculous in my head. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one.
Listen.